It's time for the news.
Algeria has called on the international community, notably the Security Council, to reject with one voice the displacement of Palestinians, calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. And scores of people have been killed in the continuous Israeli bombardments in the Gaza Strip. And Algeria has expressed her deep concern and deplored the American and British strikes that targeted several cities in the Yemen brotherly country. And those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. Algeria has called on the international community, notably the Security Council, to reject with one voice the displacement of Palestinians. During a meeting of the Security Council on the forced displacement of Palestinians, Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York, Ammar Benjama, recalled the statements of the President of the Republic, who stressed that what is happening in Gaza will remain a stigma in the conscience of humanity. He said no one at the Security Council should remain silent in the face of these displacement plans, stressing that silence is synonymous with complicity. The Algerian representative to the UN added that the situation in Gaza concerns everyone because what is happening there is beyond comprehension, without forgetting what is happening in the West Bank and Al-Quds.
We are gathering today while the Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people is reaching day 100, without outraging pictures on the screens of the massacres and without any kind of serious efforts to end them. And as the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, said earlier, what is happening in Gaza will remain a stigma in the conscience of humanity. We wonder, and all the world's people are also wondering, isn't it enough to kill more than 23,000 people, including more than 10,000 children, and enduring more than 60,000 others? Isn't it enough to have destroyed more than 60% of the Gaza infrastructure, and that all the inhabitants of Gaza are facing starvation? How can the international community accept that more than 2 million people suffer from hunger and disease?
Meanwhile, Ambassador Benjama stressed that the forced displacement plan is being implemented on all Palestinian lands through the bombing, colonization, and land annexation, claiming that these plans are doomed to failure. Algeria's representative said the forced displacement of Palestinians must be rejected, stressing that everyone must understand that the Palestinians have nowhere to go other than their land, and any forced displacement is a blatant violation of international law, in particular Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention. He also drew the attention of the Security Council's members to the savage bombardment of Gaza, the destruction of infrastructure, and targeting everything that symbolizes life, with the aim of making the region inhabitable and end any hope for Palestinians to return to their homes. He said the Israeli bombardments aim to facilitate the displacement of Palestinians from their land and annihilating the Palestinian cause by emptying the occupied lands of their population. He reiterated Algeria's request for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza.
We call again for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, as we reiterate our constant support for the Palestinian brotherly people until they establish their independent state with Al-Quds as capital.
That was Ammar Benjama, Algeria's representative to the UN Security Council, speaking at a meeting of the Security Council on the forced displacement of Palestinians. And scores of people have been killed in the continuing Israeli bombardments of Gaza Strip. 10 bombardments hit overnight the major southern town of Khan Yunis and Rafah on the border with Egypt, where hundreds of thousands of people had sought refuge. Palestinian sources said at least 60 people, mainly women and children, were killed and scores of others wounded in the strikes. Several humanitarian organizations have denounced the disastrous situation in Gaza, which has worsened worsened over the past 24 hours on account of a total cut-off of communication and internet services. The Palestinian Red Crescent said it had lost contact with its teams in Gaza and denounced the negative impact of such cuts on the coordination of the emergency services. The UN Security Council's members unanimously rejected any displacement of the Palestinians from their land and expressed concern at recent statements made by Israeli government members advocating a massive transfer of Gaza civilians toward third countries. The meeting was held at the request of Algeria, who urged the international community to speak with one voice and reject the Israeli displacement attempts of the Palestinians. And meanwhile, Martin Griffiths, Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, painted a grim picture of the horrific situation in Gaza, where more than 23,000 people have been killed and more than 58,000 injured since October the 7th. Describing as deplorable that facilities critical to the survival of civilians have come under relentless attacks, he said that as ground operations move southwards, aerial bombardments have intensified in areas where civilians were told to relocate for their safety. He said more and more people are being crammed into an ever smaller sliver of land, only to find yet more violence and deprivation, inadequate shelter, and a near absence of the most basic services. He said there is no safe place in Gaza and dignified human life is near impossibility, adding even if people were able to return home, many no longer have homes to go to. Warning that the spread of hostilities further southwards would significantly increase pressure for the mass displacement of people into neighboring countries. Griffiths firmly rejected any attempt to change the demographic composition of Gaza. And Algeria has expressed her deep concern and deplored the American and British strikes that targeted several cities in the Yemen brotherly country. And Mariam Barshi tells us more.
A communiqué of the Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that this dangerous escalation is likely to undermine the efforts made by the United Nations and the countries of the region to reach a solution to the conflict in Yemen. Algeria reaffirmed that the maritime security issue in the Red Sea cannot be resolved by ignoring the clearly visible correlation between the Houthi attacks against the merchant navy and the massacres perpetrated by the Zionist occupation in the Gaza Strip for 3 months. Algeria described the Israeli continuous random strikes against defenseless civilians in Gaza as a shameless provocation of the feelings of all Arabs and Muslims throughout the world. Algeria reaffirmed that its position calling for the cessation of military interventions in the region due to their catastrophic consequences on the world peace and the high price paid by innocent civilians. Algeria also called on all parties to stop this military dangerous and disproportionate escalation and instead focus on the root causes of the crisis.
And meanwhile, new airstrikes were carried out today by the U.S. Army against sites held by the Houthis in Yemen in response to attacks launched by them in the Red Sea. Mariam Barshigan.
The Houthis confirmed that the raids targeted military sites in the capital Sana'a and elsewhere in the country, including the western governorate of Hodeidah and Taiz in the south. Several military sites held by the Houthi rebels were earlier targeted by attacks launched by the British and US forces in retaliation for the threat posed by the rebel attacks to the international maritime traffic. The US President Joe Biden has threatened to carry out more strikes on Houthis targets unless they put an end to the attacks launched by the rebel in the Red Sea in solidarity with the Gaza Strip. The Houthis have for their part threatened to respond to the US and British strikes by attacking the interests of the two countries, which they consider legitimate targets. In a joint statement, the US-led coalition bringing together the United Kingdom and 8 other countries, including Canada and Bahrain, affirmed that the objective of the operation was to secure a de-escalation in the region. Reacting to the increasing tension in the Red Sea, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called on all the parties concerned to avert an escalation to safeguard peace and stability in the Red Sea and in the whole region. The strikes on Houthi-held sites in Yemen were condemned as illegitimate by Russia, whereas Turkey denounced what it called a disproportionate response to the Houthi attacks.
14 hours 40 minutes Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. And the Russian army has announced targeting arms factories in Ukraine, claiming that it has reached all its targets. Kiev said earlier that Russia launched 40 missiles and drones during this attack. The Russian Ministry of Defense has specified that it had hit installations of the complex of the Ukrainian military industrial manufacturer of shells, gunpowder and drones. And the commissioner of the Ethiopian Disaster Risk Management Commission reported that the Ethiopian authorities have been preparing to work with their partners to provide humanitarian aid to 6.6 million people during the next 3 months. He indicated that despite the major financial constraint and organization issues, the Ethiopian government and the charities are working twice as hard to save lives in the most affected zones. This situation was due to a series of extreme climate such as drought and floods and armed conflicts affecting many lives. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and back to the country now. The president of the Algerian Football Federation, AFF, Walid Saadi, has arrived in Côte d'Ivoire to attend the opening ceremony of the 34th African Cup of Nations. AFCON 2023 reported to 2024 tonight at the Alassane Ouattara Dimpi Stadium. The ceremony will be followed by an opening game between the host country, the Côte d'Ivoire and Guinea-Bissau at 9 p.m. Algerian time. The president of the AFF will go to the city of Bouaké to attend Algeria's national team first match of the tournament against Angola, and at the stadium or the Stade de la Paix on Monday, 15th January at 9 p.m. Algiers time. Algeria will then play Burkina Faso on Saturday, 20th January, and Mauritania on the Tuesday, January 23rd. Let's recall that the first two of each group, as well as the best thirds, will qualify. 14 hours 43 minutes Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and now the headlines. Algeria has called on the international community, notably the Security Council, to reject with one voice the displacement of Palestinians, calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. And scores of people have been killed in the relentless Israeli bombardments in the Gaza Strip. And Algeria has expressed her deep concern and deplored the American and British airstrikes that targeted several cities in the Yemen brotherly country. 14 hours 44 minutes Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and I invite you now to listen to this program devoted to Algeria's diplomacy, compiled and presented by Jama Salmani.
The year 2023 was marked by Algeria's election as non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. The Algerian presidency has described the election as a diplomatic success, showing that the new Algeria is back on the international stage, adding that it reflected the international community's respect and esteem for the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune. In recognition of its pivotal role in the region, Algeria has been elected with an overwhelming majority of the 193 UN General Assembly member states in the first round of a secret ballot as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for a 2-year term starting on the 1st of January 2024. Following the election of Algeria, her permanent representative to the United Nations, Ammar Ben Jama, had this to say.
I would like to extend my sincerest thanks to the friendly countries that voted today in favor of the Algerian candidature as a non-permanent member of the Security Council for the term 2024-2025. Algeria's membership constitutes indeed a high priority for Algeria's diplomacy and for President Abdelmajid Tebboune. This brilliant election is another testimony and a mark of recognition of Algeria's positive contribution and tireless effort to maintain peace and security at regional and international level. It is also a heavy but still honorable and very rewarding responsibility. Algeria will embrace this responsibility with a deep sense of humility, dedication, and commitment, and will contribute as a responsible and credible partner to enable global action in the face of global challenges by presenting ideas and initiatives that would enhance the role of multilateralism and maintaining international peace and security, thus meeting the need and the expectation and the aspiration of all mankind.
The adhesion of Algeria to the Security Council shows the international community's recognition of her contribution to the promotion of international peace and security and her commitment to defend fair causes with rigor and dedications. On the occasion, ceremony was organized here in Algiers in the presence of top government officials, diplomats and ambassadors. Two of the ambassadors who attended the ceremony had this to say.
I want to congratulate Algeria on its election. We are confident that Algeria will be a very good representative of Africa and a good representative for the Arab world. They have the principles, respect the principles of the UN Charter for countries that supports sovereignty, sovereign integrity of states, as well as the self-determination of states.
Algeria has a big potential to contribute greatly for the work of the Security Council in the United Nations. We are the member of the non-permanent seat in the Security Council starting this year. So Japan and Algeria will be together in the Security Council next year. And that will give us a great opportunity to work together. And we know that Algeria is very firm in respecting and also safeguarding the principles of UN Charter, and which is very important in the current situation. And we are calling for the promotion of rule of law in the international society. And so we count very much on Algeria, and we are very much looking forward to working together with Algeria within and even outside the Security Council.
The election of Algeria is the result of the President of the Republic's vision, an approach to the preservation of peace and security worldwide based on peaceful coexistence, peaceful settlement of disputes, and non-interference in the internal affairs of countries. This year, 2023, was marked by the speech of President Tebboune at the 78th session of UN General Assembly in New York, in which he stressed the need to build a more just and equitable multipolar world. President Abdelmajid Tebboune said that for the past 50 years, the Algerian government has been pointing out how the global order's dysfunction prevents equality among member states, and that conflicts and crises have reached unprecedented levels and displaced millions amid an increasing number of emergencies worldwide. He stressed the necessity to uphold the rules of the Charter and establish a sound framework to strengthen international cooperation, adding that the global goals must be achieved in a multipolar world.
لقد حان الوقت للتفكير معا في سبل إعلاء قيم ومبادئ ميثاق الأمم المتحدة وتعزيز التزاماتنا الجماعية وإرساء الأسس المتينة التي تفضي إلى المزيد من التعاون العالمي الفعال بشأن القضايا الرئيسية حتى نتمكن من إشعاع السلم والأمن الدوليين وتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة في ظل عالم متعدد الأقطاب.
President Tebboune says, quote, The time has come for all of us to reflect together to uphold the principles and goals of the UN Charter and to strengthen our common engagement and to establish a sound framework for further effective international cooperation on major issues with the aim of consolidating international peace and security, as well as achieving sustainable development goals in a multipolar world. End of quote. As Algeria prepares to become a non-permanent council member, it stands ready to strengthen cooperation with all council members and use her experience in mediation to seek peaceful solutions to conflicts. The president said it would bring the aspirations of the African continent and Arab world to the council as it focuses on lasting solutions to conflicts by dealing with their root causes.
ومن هذا المنظور فإن الجزائر التي تتأهب لتبوء مقعدها غير الدائم بمجلس الأمن تعي ثقة المسؤولية الملقاة على عاتقها بالنظر للتحديات الجمة التي تواجهها المجموعة الدولية. وأغتنم هذه السانحة لأجدد الشكر لكل الدول 184 التي صوتت لصالح بلادي، وهي ثقة ستحرص الجزائر على صونها أثناء عهدتها بالمجلس، وستسعى على تجسيدها بالتعاون الوطيد مع كافة الدول الأعضاء في مجلس الأمن وفي هيئة الأمم المتحدة.
The president says, quote, Algeria, which prepares herself to be a non-permanent member of the Security Council, is aware about her responsibility, particularly in the face of the challenges the international community is facing. Bearing all that in mind, I want to take this opportunity to once again express my gratitude to the 184 member states who voted in favor of Algeria, and this is an expression of trust that Algeria will seek to preserve throughout her term in the Security Council. Algeria is ready to strengthen cooperation with all member states in the Security Council. End of quote. The progress on the Council's reform is also essential. Algeria will continue its efforts to change the historic injustices against the African continent and support oppressed peoples fighting in their freedom. Pointing to the Algerian government's long-standing support for the Palestinian people's right to establish an independent state, he called on the Council to adopt a resolution to guarantee the two-state solution and end the unilateral practices of the occupying authority, including the settlements on the Palestinian territory. In his speech, he called for an extraordinary assembly session to grant the State of Palestine the status of a full United Nations member state. He stressed Algeria's readiness to share her experience in combating terrorism, which must be a priority for the entire African region.
Hi and welcome to our weekly program devoted to Algerian economic news. First in the news, the government, meeting under the chairmanship of Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi, has examined the regulatory framework for the creation and operation of free zones in implementation of the directives of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, concerning the strengthening of trade with neighboring countries of the South and the promotion of non-hydrocarbon exports. The government has also examined the most effective means of ensuring the supply of basic consumer goods, particularly in the southern regions, through the development of a system of compensation for transport costs to these regions. The E-Metal Group has announced that production units at the Sider El Hajjar complex in the province of Annaba have resumed their activities after the blast furnace was restarted on 19 December 2023. The production units came into operation on 1st January 2024, with cast iron being transported from the blast furnace to steel mills 1 and 2 and the electric steel mill, pending the arrival of semi-finished products at the rolling mills. The national insurance market is expected to generate premium income, including international acceptances of around 168.4 billion Algerian dinars in 2023, an increase of 2.6% compared with 2022, according to the National Insurance Council, CNA, in its business report. According to the Council's closing forecast, non-life insurance companies expect to close the 2023 financial year with total premiums estimated at 145.2 billion dinars, up 2.9% on the previous year. In more Algerian economic news, the Minister of Fisheries and Fish Production, Ahmed Badani, has instructed his sector's executives to speed up the implementation of the advantages set out in the 2024 Finance Law. These instructions were given at a coordination meeting held at the ministry headquarters chaired by Ahmed Badani and devoted to examining priority issues in the sector's strategy for 2024. The Algiers Stock Exchange, which is preparing to record new listings from January, has recorded an increase of 40% in terms of market capitalization in the first half of the year, confirming the positive indicators of 2022, the president of COSOB, Youssef Bouznada, indicated. He underlined that the stock exchange will experience a new dynamic in 2024 thanks to the new regulations designed to facilitate fundraising and the listing of new companies. The Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Youssef Sherfa, has chaired a working meeting with the members of the National Council of the Interprofessional Office of the Cereal Sector, OIC, devoted to the measures taken to ensure the success of the 2023-2024 ploughing and sowing season. The meeting, attended by ministry officials and the director of the OIC, was part of the implementation of measures launched by the President of the Republic to help cereal producers, particularly those affected by drought, during the 2022-2023 season. And to wind up our program, the law on forests and forest resources aimed at preserving, developing and rationally exploiting them as part of a global and sustainable vision has been published in the official Gazette number 83. The purpose of Law 2321, signed by the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, on 23rd December, is to define and lay down rules for the management, protection, extension and development of the national forest heritage as part of sustainable development, as well as the use of forest and forest land and their protection from deforestation and erosion. And with this, we come to the end of our weekly program devoted to Algerian economic news. Goodbye.
مع إذاعة الجزائر الدولية لن تفوتكم لحظة واحدة من الأخبار السياسية والاقتصادية الهامة. إذاعة الجزائر الدولية